I'm Ross Thompson, and this is Brittany Whitten, and we're going to be talking about Cooperative Discipline by Linda Alford, and I'm about to share our screen with our PowerPoint. Take it away, Brittany.
So I'm Brittany. I'm going to start us off talking about what it is and a few of the key points. So cooperative discipline asserts that students choose their behavior and that we as teachers have power to influence, not necessarily control their choices. This then puts an emphasis on the cooperation in order to create a positive approach to classroom management. And Albert argues that we need to learn how to interact with students so that they'll want to choose the appropriate behavior rather than forcing them to choose the behavior and comply with rules. So kind of an overview, like I said, instead of trying to fix it, Albert suggests that teachers should influence student choice, and she talks about the 3 C's: connecting to the teacher and other students, contributing to the class, and feeling capable of successful behavior and academic work. Following these 3 C's helps us to build influence, build self-esteem for the students, that therefore strengthens the students' motivation and helps them learn and cooperate. A few of the key concepts to this theory by Albert is that we understand the causes of misbehavior. So the first one that we're going to talk about is attention, and this applies to students who want to be the center of attention, whether it's good or bad attention. So a few of the strategies that Albert suggests when you're interacting with students who exhibit this kind of misbehavior is one thing just to kind of give them the attention, but not in a positive light. So if you kind of stand close to them during the lesson, you use their name during the lesson, call directly on them for questions, give specific praise to a student nearby who's on task. These kind of things kind of give in to the behavior that the attention that the students want, but it's kind of like forcing them to give the good behavior so that they get that. So if you give specific praise to a student next to them who's on task and they want that same attention, they're going to be on task so that they receive the positive attention. The next one is power. Students who want to be the boss of the whole classroom or at least take away power from the teacher. A few of the strategies that Albert suggests include avoiding direct confrontation by agreeing with the student or changing the subject. This can kind of sound like you're giving in to the student, but they want that power and they want to be the boss. So if you take that and just go ahead and give in to them and move on, then they're losing that fight for power. They're losing what they expect is to be denied that power. You can kind of say things that acknowledge a student's power by saying, you're right, I can't make you finish the math problems, but I'll be collecting the assignment at the end of class. So you're putting the responsibility on the student, the responsibility to complete the task, the responsibility for the grade on the student. You could also change the activity to something unexpected and initiate another class discussion on a topic of interest. This will throw the student off and they won't know how to behave, and so they'll be kind of taken away from the normal routine of things, and it kind of forces them to lose that power that they want and that they're trying to take. So the third reason for misbehavior would be revenge. This is students who feel the need to exact revenge on the teacher or other students, whether it's physical or emotional. So a few of the strategies to combat this would be to revoke a privilege, such as not allowing them to use a certain kind of equipment or activity. Building a caring relationship by using affirmation. This kind of goes back to the part on the first slide about encouragement and asking students to kind of understand why they're behaving a certain way. If you build a positive relationship with them using affirmative statements, you can say kind of like, you're okay, but the choice of your behavior is not. You're maintaining that relationship, but you're making sure the student understands that what they're doing is not okay. You could also require the return, repair, or replacement of damaged objects. So if the revenge the students are trying to exact is physical and they damage certain parts of the classroom, you can require that they fix it or that they replace it. And that would be one incentive for the student to not exact revenge, knowing that they're going to have to replace it. So the last cause of misbehavior would be avoidance of failure. This applies to students who feel that they're not competent enough, they're not smart enough to complete a task. And so they therefore procrastinate or they cause a distraction so they won't have to complete the task. Things like this, to combat it, you would acknowledge the difficulty of the assigned task, but you'd remind the student of the past success that they have. So once again, you're establishing a positive relationship. You're reminding the student that they can do it, even though this is a difficult task. You can also modify instructions and materials. This would be useful if the student does require accommodations. You need to remember that about your students, because you're going to have varied levels of ability within your classroom. And so by giving modified instructions or materials, you help eliminate that. You can also encourage students' use of saying, instead of saying I can't, to say I can, by recognizing achievements. So if the student says they cannot fulfill a certain assignment, you could encourage them to talk about what they can do instead of what they can't. And then another thing is to provide peer support. So peer tutors, put students in groups where it's balanced, where some students can complete the tasks and are proficient in them, in order to help other students, so that they feel like they're getting peer help rather than just teacher instruction. Okay, and so we're not going to talk about this teacher-student roles, and Ross is going to take it over from here.
All right, so what would be the teacher's role in this theory? So the teacher basically has the main role in order for this theory to really work in the classroom. The teacher must encourage and model good behavior. They should understand that students, their students, and the reasons for their misbehavior. So this teacher really has to know their students in order for this theory really to work. Try to include parents, caretakers, and other teachers, because this is a team effort. Use objective and non-judgmental terms. So don't try to make the student feel like what they're doing is wrong. Just always encourage them to make the right decision. The student's role in this theory is honestly, it's very minimum. Because mostly the main emphasis is on the teacher. But honestly, the main part is the student just has to be willing to form a good and positive relationship with the teacher. So honestly, it's just mainly the teacher, and then if the student's just willing to just form that positive relationship with the teacher, and that's how this theory can really work. So how does this work in the classroom? So like as we said before, always use objective and non-judgmental terms. So, so let's say a student's, not working and they're off task, and you just are done with it. And so you just say, hey, you must complete your work or you're going to go to the principal's office. Instead of just giving them that one decision, give them a choice, because ultimately you want to make the student choose to be a good student. So instead of giving them this ultimatum, if they have to do their work or they're going to be sent to the principal's office, give them this choice. So instead of saying that, you might just say, hey, you can either sit quietly and keep your hands and feet to yourself and complete the assignment, or you can finish the assignment in the principal's office. You decide. So honestly, what you do to make this work is just to get to know your student and just promote positive behavior, and then just give students the choice to be a good student. You need to help student develop a code of conduct. An example would be like, I'm a respectful, responsible, self-prepared student. I will not keep anyone from learning or teaching. You really need to get students to abide by these conducts. And so these are just some examples that we had here. And then just some advantages and disadvantages of this theory. So there are some great advantages to it because it can really work. If done correctly, that you can promote positive classroom behavior in your classroom, and honestly, it would just better the students' lives because they're learning to be a more well-behaved individual, and that's just going to allow them just to go far in life. You give choice to be a well-behaved student. You're not giving them this ultimatum, either be good or face the consequences. The choice is up to the student. You don't make the choice. The teacher does not make the choice. The student does. And in this practice is just a great way to bond and develop partnerships with your students, because a big part of it is just getting to know your students and just developing this bond and partnership. Because if your students can tell that you care for them and care for their success, then they're gonna want to respect you and want to cooperate in your classroom. But there are some disadvantages to this theory. To be honest with you, this theory seems to be more effective in elementary education. Maybe in middle school this theory might be able to work well, but honestly in high school I don't see this being in a very good practice, just because honestly once you get to that stage, a student knows how to behave or not, and they're going to make the choice whether they're going to behave or not, or they're not going to behave. So I feel like this is a more effective practice in elementary education, because if they're exposed to it whenever they're younger students, then they're maybe by the time they get to secondary education, they're going to be more well-behaved students, because they've already been exposed to this practice in their earlier years of school. And it also requires students to make an effort to be a good student, because it really just depends on if the student's going to be willing to cooperate or not. You're giving that authority to the student, and if they don't want to make the effort, then it's not going to work. And they just have to be willing to make that relationship work, and also with this theory to work. And whenever a teacher sees misbehavior, they have to pay attention to it immediately and address it immediately. If you don't address it immediately, it could really be ineffective. So that can be very hard to implement. If you have to remember to address the behavior as soon as it happens. And this was the conclusion of our presentation. And then here's a list of references that we had came up with, and we hope that you enjoyed it.